We the people are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the man who perverts the Constitution. And that's a quote from Abraham Lincoln. I'm Linda Kibe, and you're welcome to The Gavel. The 130th Inter-Parliamentary Union Assembly meeting has come and gone, but the memories still linger. We saw parliamentarians from more than 100 countries discuss issues such as peace and security, the crisis in the Central African Republic, and nuclear disarmament. We all witnessed a significant election at the IPU. Let's bring you the details.
The 130th Inter-Parliamentary Union Conference in Geneva, Switzerland, saw parliamentarians from more than 100 countries gather to deliberate on several issues. The general debate for the Inter-Parliamentary Union Conference was IPU at 125, renewing commitment to peace and security. War and conflict continue to leave imprints across the globe. From Syria to Sudan, Central African Republic and even Nigeria, war and conflicts have left thousands dead and millions displaced. The biggest casualties are women and children. It is no wonder that the issue of peace and democracy dominated talks during the assembly meetings. Parliamentarians were reminded that as the voice of the people, they must be at the heart of reconciliation and peace building.
Parliamentarians need to be an integral part of this process in identifying priorities, in monitoring progress, mobilizing resources for development, enhancing accountability through legislative oversight, and giving voice to the most vulnerable through proper representation.
Addressing the Assembly, Senate President David Mark reminded the IPU of the need to reflect on the role of Parliament in addressing the multitude of challenges across the world's conflict zones.
Recent political crises in Eastern Europe and the Sub-Saharan region are a stark reminder that we must remain even vigilant as we strive to achieve peaceful coexistence between and within nations.
As parliamentarians from other countries reflect on the crisis in different parts of the world, Nigerian lawmakers say they are using the opportunity which the IPU presents to engage with lawmakers in neighboring countries to end the problem of insurgency in Nigeria. Terrorists from the dreaded Boko Haram sect have used neighboring countries which share borders with Nigeria as launch pads to set the northeastern states on fire.
I'm taking time off to talk to my colleagues in our neighboring countries for them to assist us. Fighting insurgency and terrorism is not a localized affair. You can't do it all on your own.
But this lawmaker says the war on terrorism in Nigeria would be difficult to win if attention is not given to Nigeria's borders.
When you talk about border, presupposes that you have personnel that will mind the border. There's nowhere that is fenced. When you go to the Czech Republic, to the Cameroonian borders, everywhere is open. So how do you mind such a border? We really need to spend money in our borders. Besides the issue of terrorism, the Assembly meeting paid attention to gender issues and the role of women in politics. The outgoing Secretary General gave a review of how well women are engaging in politics in different countries.
We've always said, and we continue to say, that the Nordic countries are in the lead. They have, on average, now 42% of women in parliaments. But when it comes to the geographical regions, it is not Europe that is in the lead, it is the Americas, where they have gone up to over 25% of women. They lead before Europe, which is slightly behind. And Sub-Saharan Africa is further behind. But all of them are very close to the 25% point mark.
But how can Nigerian women become more prominent in politics?
Rwanda, as you know, has the highest female participation in the world with 56%. You know, I think the next one is Finland. So we are not, as a group, we are not doing that badly. But Nigeria is not doing as well as it should, you know, among the Community of African Nations. We are not doing well at all. We have just about 7% female participation, and this is grossly below what it should be, which is 35%. Countries like Ghana have 24, others 30-something, 40-something, 16, but we have just 7. We'll be going on a detailed tour maybe of some African countries to just see what's the neatest or easiest way out of this.
An election has a process. If you are not a party member, you cannot qualify to contest, you cannot qualify to have a place in parliament or any elective post. So what I'm calling on Nigerian women is, the time is here now. 2015 is by the corner. We need to gear up by participating in registration in all parties, so that when the time comes for general election, we should find ourselves in the parties, have our card, both go for our respective seats, starting from councillorship, State House of Assembly, National Assembly, so that we can fill the vacancy where we are crying for.
The high point of the 130th IPU Assembly was the election which saw Cameroonian-born Martin Chongong emerge as the Secretary General of the IPU. It was a great day for Africa. For the first time in 125 years, an African was elected as the Secretary General of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. It was a keenly contested election as 3 candidates vied for the position.
I came in this morning before you as a candidate, asking for your votes. I am addressing you now as the Secretary General-elect of the Inter-Parliamentary Union.
For some Nigerian parliamentarians, the emergence of Mr. Chongong as Secretary General is a good thing for Africa.
But he's somebody who has been within the IPU body for 2 decades. So he knows the intra-workings, he knows most of the delegations, and most importantly, he could speak the 2 languages being used here, which are English and French. It's a progress for Africa.
Besides an African emerging as the Secretary General-elect, priority was given to African issues during the IPU Assembly meeting.
He's not a man who talks often, but when he does, expect rivers of wisdom flowing out. We caught up with the Clerk of the Senate, Mr. Benedict Ifeturi, who spoke on the issues with the Nigerian Parliament and the way forward.
All right, I'm here with the Clerk of the Senate of the National Assembly, Nigeria's National Assembly, at the IPU Assembly in Geneva. Sir, what lessons are you going to take from this IPU to Nigeria to strengthen the legislative and parliamentary processes in Nigeria?
I must let you know that I've been attending the IPU for a very long time now. If you like, I'm a veteran in the parliamentary process here. The IPU is one of the oldest parliamentary gatherings of bureaucrats all over the world. And here we learn a lot of things. We exchange views, ideas, experiences about the parliament. One of the experiences is that I've observed that in many other parliaments, Zambia, Kenya, Democratic Republic of Congo, they have some similar experiences. For example, we have observed from our exchanges that the court processes, court injunctions, and court decisions are beginning to impede the legislative process. In a place like Kenya, for example, there is an investigation going on in Parliament, and there is a court injunction stopping that investigation of the process of Parliament. That is serious. Right now, the Speaker of the Kenyan Parliament might be facing contempt if that investigation continues. But the question is, can the court stop the National Assembly, the Senate or the House, from carrying out its normal, routine, constitutional process of legislation? This is what we are learning here now. Because even in Nigeria, you find out that there are a lot of court injunctions that are impeding the legislative process, that are trying to stop the National Assembly from performing its statutory functions of legislation. And I tell you something from my experience as a parliamentary officer. I've been in Parliament for a very long time, and I want you to note this, my statement, that parliamentary practice and procedure is not a field of law. Parliamentary practice and procedure is not a field of law. None of those lawyers study parliamentary practice in their places. So what I'm telling you is that there's intricacy, there are complexities, there's dynamism in Parliament. And it's not easy for you to sit in the courts and determine what happens throughout a legislative process. And what is happening now is that most of the courts are impeding. We'll understand if it's an election petition and you upturn the election petition based on the processes outside the parliament. But to begin to involve yourself in the processes, it's just like the National Assembly stopping the courts, the judiciary from doing its work. So this is a major lesson we are beginning to learn and how to grapple with it. Don't forget that there is a court position in Nigeria that says that if there is a presidential veto override, that the process is started all over again in the National Assembly. That is that rather than do a third reading or vote on the bill and pass it, that process is wrong. The court says in Nigeria that the process had to start all over again. Whatever informed that procedure, in the National Assembly, to start it all over again means to gazette it, to do first reading, to do second reading, to do public hearing, all these processes again at government expense. And in the legislature, there are areas you can intervene. If a bill is moving from one house to the other, you don't need to go over the process again. So you see, the challenge here is the courts are beginning to impede on the legislative process. What I'm learning is that we begin to advise our presiding officers on how to go about this process.
Now, we have a unique problem in Nigeria in the sense that we're going into an election year, and over time we've seen that there's a high turnover of lawmakers. 2015 is around the corner, and we're hearing that many lawmakers might not be coming to the National Assembly. So we're having new people come to the National Assembly, new lawmakers who will begin to have to learn the legislative process from the beginning. What is the way out?
I think the way out is not within the legislature. It's beyond the legislature. The way out will be first for the parties, the political parties who are either in government or out of government should ensure that their members are returned, and they should start the processes within the parties. I understand that maybe a party like the majority party in Nigeria, the People's Democratic Party, is beginning to look at returning majority of its members. It is now left for the party to determine which is more valuable. Is it for the parliament to become a resting place for governors who have finished 8 terms in office, or for the parliament to be a place where you will begin to nurture experience, legislative expertise, and legislators that can contribute to governance? It is the party that will decide. Because if the political party decide to bring in their governors, that means they don't know the value of their parliamentary officers. A parliamentary officer like Senator David Mark, who has been there for 8 years, for 12 years, you want to trade him for a governor? What is the governor going to achieve? What's the value that is going to bring into the legislative process? All the senators that have been there for 3-4 terms, what is the value that the governor is going to bring to the legislative process? That is what you have to assess. The political parties have to wake up, they have to sit up, they have to understand how it is done in other places. You need to push your first 11 into parliament so that you have high quality legislation, you have good support for your policies in governance, you support your president if he's in power, your people, legislators that understand the rudiments of legislative practice. That's what I'm telling you, because legislative practice is something you gain by experience. It's not by study. That is why I said that legislative practice and procedure is not a field of law. Even if you are a lawyer, if you come to parliament, you look like a baby. You must learn the rudiments. You must learn how to process legislation. You must learn how to move motion. You must learn how to do syndication with your fellow colleagues. You must learn these things. So it depends on the party. Political parties must decide what they want. If they just want to bring in people to parliament just like that, or they want value of legislation, they want legislation, we want to raise the level of legislation in the country and to contribute to policies of governance, then they will ensure that those who have been there continue to remain there, spend a longer time in parliament. And then the people too, the people, Nigerians, voters, must understand that parliament is not a place where you execute projects, where you have money to execute projects, and that will determine whether a legislator is voted for or not. Parliament is determined, performance in parliament is determined by legislation, motions, how you move policies, you move legislation through the process.
Now this brings me to a peculiar problem in Nigeria. There seems to be a disconnect between Nigerians and the National Assembly. It appears that some Nigerians do not exactly understand what the National Assembly is there for. Going forward, how do we address this problem?
So many ways to solve it. From my experience here, One, the press, like you, the media. You also need to understand the way the parliament functions. You need to educate the people. You need to tell them how the parliament functions. They need to know that parliament is not it's not projects. It's legislation, it's bills, it's motion. It's how you drive policies, how you move motions that reflect the wishes of the people, how you pass them through and ensure that the government, the executive part of government, implements those motions. That is one. Then two, we need to do what is called engage the civil society. The National Assembly said we need to begin to engage civil society. I'm happy that the Senate President is engaging civil society organizations, the NGOs. He has a forum for the NGOs, and they talk from time to time. You engage them because they are the ones that have a wider reach also, more than the legislator. They have a wider reach, especially on human rights, on children's rights, on women's rights, on these topical issues that affect the people. You need to engage civil society. And then we need to do youth parliament. We need to we have youth parliament, but it's not very elaborate. We need to begin to introduce youth parliament, where the youths, the schools, teachers, pupils, they come to National Assembly. We have a youth parliament where they participate, they go through the process of legislation, they understand what is going on, they go back to inform their parents, their people, they have a way of reaching out. So we need to do youth parliament. So if we can start some of all these ways, I think that the people will understand more what is happening in National Assembly, and we can carry them along. Everywhere in the world now, we are talking about a major policy of engaging the public, constructive engagement of the public. And we in National Assembly, we are doing that. We are in the process of doing that.